News alert on President Trump traveling to Las Vegas today to pay his respects to victims of the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history. He's expected to arrive in moments. The president will meet with survivors and first responders. 59 people were killed and hundreds more wounded when a gunman opened fire on concertgoers Sunday night. We are following the story, and we will bring it to you more as it happens. Fox News alert, President Trump's growing battle with the mainstream media reaching another level today. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson speaking out a short time ago, denying a report from NBC News that he considered resigning this summer amid a rift with the president. This is Outnumbered, everyone. I'm Sandra Smith, and here today, Harris Faulkner, former deputy spokesperson for the State Department, Marie Harf, the editor of townhall.com, Katie Pavlich, and today's hashtag One Lucky Guy, Fox News contributor and political editor of townhall.com, Guy Benson is here, and it is good to have you, sir.
It is great to be back. Beautiful new set, beautiful new studio.
Yeah. Beautiful tie.
Yeah, it's
looking good.
It has a new car smell.
It does.
Yeah. And we're going to drive it.
All right, let's get going. Secretary Tillerson refuting the NBC report and defending President Trump.
I think it's the most important element of the article is to reaffirm my commitment to this role that President Trump's asked me to serve, and to dispel with this notion that I have ever considered leaving. I have answered that question repeatedly. For some reason, it continues to be misreported. There's never been a consideration in my mind to leave. I serve at the appointment of the president, and I'm here for as long as the president feels I can be useful to achieving his objectives.
And then a reporter asked him this.
Could you address the main headline of this story, that you called the president a moron? And if not, where do you think these reports or
I'm not going to deal with petty stuff like that. I mean, this is what I don't understand about Washington. Again, I'm not from this place, but the places I come from, we don't deal with that kind of petty nonsense. And it is intended to do nothing but divide people. And I'm just not going to be part of this effort to divide this administration.
And President Trump tweeting this: NBC News is fake news and more dishonest than even CNN. They are disgrace to good reporting. No wonder their news ratings are way down. He also tweeted this: the NBC News story has just been totally refuted by Secretary Tillerson and Vice President Pence. It is fake news. They should issue an apology to America. The NBC report had claimed Vice President Pence intervened to talk Tillerson out of resigning and to ease tensions. So, okay, I won't even direct my question. This all just happening moments ago. Guy, what do you make of it all?
Well, I think that this is an audience of one that the Secretary of State was speaking to, and that's the president. He took what was sort of an interesting gossipy story and blew it up into a much bigger story by calling a news conference to talk about it. And the reason he did it is because I think he wanted to signal directly to the president that he is loyal and he's on board, and that these whispers are at least misleading, and wanted to punch at the media, which is something that the president loves.
But let me just get this out of the way. He did not directly address the use of that particular word and say, no, I did not say that. He just said he would not address these petty things.
So to Guy's point, I mean, you could make the argument that he's managing up. That's what I hear you saying. But the one thing he didn't do was kind of manage across the board the comment with a, no, I didn't say that, which would completely refute whether or not it was actually said. So now it's up to NBC and these others to try to prove it. We'll see. I mean, I don't know what that's going to look like, but the bigger point of all this is that he and the president are on the same page. He called it nonsense. He's not from D.C. He hit all of the president's talking points on the fact that I don't come from here.
Right.
So we don't deal with this
But I don't know that you can say that they're on the same page just based on that news conference, because, Marie, you and I talked about it this morning. As far as their thoughts on foreign policy are concerned, they have been accused of having mixed messaging coming out of this White House.
Absolutely. And just this week, we saw President Trump publicly in a tweet sort of criticize Rex Tillerson for diplomacy with North Korea, saying it's not going to work, don't even try. There have been multiple news reports that they have been at odds on certain issues. I do not think he can deny that he said that. From what I've heard, multiple sources are saying he did. And keep in mind, if you're a cabinet official and you have to give a press conference to say that you are still supportive of the president and you're not quitting, especially for one.
But Marie, they're going to say this is media is acting in a way that is extremely biased towards this president.
But but let me just answer that, and then I'm coming to you, Katie. Especially because Rex Tillerson doesn't speak a lot publicly. Guy is right. He took a gossipy story. And I think the president wanted him to come out and basically pledge his allegiance to this administration. He did have an audience of one.
Well, I also think that he's trying to address this issue of these petty stories constantly being in the news and being a distraction to the governing agenda of the administration at every single level. You look at the way he broke down his statement. He reestablished his commitment to the president. He reestablished why exactly he took the job in the first place, mentioning he didn't know the president before he took the job, and then listed a number of serious accomplishments from his team at the State Department all the way to Nikki Haley to really show that this is a very petty issue.
To be clear, by the way, the report cites 3 administration officials, right? As this wasn't just one source.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Sandra.
He went as far as to say that the Vice President, Mike Pence, had to intervene to prevent Tillerson from quitting.
Which he outright denied. That I've never considered resigning. I've said this multiple times.
He said the Vice
One thing I do want to address real quickly is this issue of the president allegedly not being on the same page as Rex Tillerson. They're on the same page. They're just working in different ways. Just because they're having differences doesn't mean they're at odds. And just because they have different messages publicly doesn't mean they're not on the same page privately.
So Tillerson said, I never had to be persuaded by the vice president to stay because I never considered leaving. So he did refute that. Let's move on. Fox News alert now as we await the arrival of President Trump in Las Vegas. The president is headed to the city days after a gunman opened fire, as you know, on that huge crowd of concert goers. He killed 58 people and himself and injured hundreds more. In Las Vegas, they're remembering those killed by the gunman just days ago and praying for the hundreds who were wounded. The White House says the president's visit won't get into the politics of the situation, so you can read between the lines. He won't be talking about what the Democrats want to talk about, gun control. Instead, he'll focus on those hurt by this tragedy and those affected most. He'll meet first with the patients and the people for whom medical services are caring before he goes to see the many heroes who jumped into the action amid all the chaos and fear Sunday night. The president said this earlier.
Well, it's a very sad thing. We're going to pay our respects and to see the police who have done really a fantastic job in a very short time. And yeah, they're learning a lot more. And that'll be announced at the appropriate time. It's a very, very sad day for me, personally. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, the story never gets any easier, and the facts keep building. Katie, where are we in all this?
Well, I think the president, again, is here with a very humbling moment. These are some of the hardest things that a president of the United States has to go through. I think watching him today, talking to people who were helping that day is going to really be the story here. I mean, this morning, Sandra had on a Marine who helped bring people to the hospital. His girlfriend had broken vertebrae and a broken rib, and she still was throwing people over a fence to get them to help. I mean, this really is a story of humanity and Americans helping each other literally under fire. And I think he's going to be able to highlight a lot of that today in a way that is uniting and non-political, which is, I think, what we really need right now.
Yeah, Sandra, as you were talking with that Marine, and we've seen so many people tell their stories that have been replicated throughout, just surviving the worst case scenario, a war zone, really. I just can't get past that human element to even move on.
And this is such an opportunity for this president to put the focus back on them, to put the focus back on the victims, the first responders, the people that weren't first responders that ended up being, that helped to save so many lives that night.
And I think it's exactly right for the White House to say this is going to be a politics-free zone, at least today. We know, and we're going to talk about it later in the show, guns are a huge issue. Gun control is being hotly debated. People are at each other's throats over the politics of this. But for the president to visit this site for the first time, to comfort people who are grieving, and to buck up people who were really heroic in their actions and their behavior under extreme duress, That is precisely what the country needs. I think that's what Las Vegas needs. And I hope that the White House maintains the non-political posture, because there will be pressure for them to get political. They're going to get questions that are political in nature. And I think the president's instinct here is correct to say none of that, not there, not today.
You know, Marie, you and I have talked off camera about this, and it's one of those things where it's not even bipartisan. It's nonpartisan to come together today. The president doing this back to back to back. He was just in Puerto Rico yesterday, being consoler in chief.
As Katie said, it's the toughest job he has. It's a very hard one. And I want to hear exactly what Guy said when the president goes to Las Vegas today. I also hope there's not more tweets. I mean, the fake news tweets this morning, I understand why he did it, but I really want the focus for the rest of the day to be on those first responders, on the survivors, and on the victims.
And I would hope that the media would also take a break and focus on their survivors too, and not criticize every little thing that the president does today. If he happens to say one word that is out of place.
We saw a lot of that yesterday.
Exactly.
Well,
that would be nice as well.
I think that we'll see how it's covered. And I don't think the president was perfect yesterday. And I think it's fair to say here's what he did well and here's what people were looking for a little differently, maybe.
I wish they'd said it so gracefully. That was beautifully put.
Thank you.
Marie.
By the way, we just saw on the screen, we put up on our big board photos of the victims.
Yes.
And I think what sometimes happens, and it's natural, especially since there they are, so much mystery surrounding the motives of this monster and what he did and why he did it. And there is a journalistic instinct to go after that. But he is a despicable piece of garbage who stole those people's lives.
Right. Yeah.
And focusing on the lives that they led and the realities that were shattered of those around them, that is newsworthy just as much, if not more so, than coming after and finding out more about this horrible person.
Well, and one of the things we haven't talked about much is you talk about the lives lost. The lives changed forever. Some of those injuries.
Yeah.
I mean, Dr. Siegel, one of our members here, our Fox News contributors, was telling me that it's like a bomb goes off inside the body when you're hit from that distance. High velocity bullet traveling through. It doesn't just go in and out. He said it becomes shrapnel in the body. I mean, some people's lives, they're going to survive, but they're changed forever.
Right, and the mental aspect of going through something like this is just horrific. I mean, many of the people who are there will have serious PTSD as a result of this, and it's just a shame because, like you said, their lives have been changed forever as a result of one monster who none of us can relate to.
Yeah, big job by the president today. He's been doing it consistently. We will watch and cover that live here on Fox News Channel as he touches down in Las Vegas. President Trump is facing some big questions as well as he's headed to Las Vegas to comfort those victims of Sunday's concert massacre. While the White House attempts to keep the focus there, Democrats are stepping up pressure on the president to work with them on gun control. You heard Guy say it. What can we expect from either side on this day? And we're just moments away from a Senate panel's update on their investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election. We'll have the details. Stay close.
Fox News alert right now. We are awaiting Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman Richard Burr and Vice Chairman Mark Warner with an update on their probe into Russian meddling in the election. The senators are expected to largely endorse an intelligence report that Moscow did interfere in the election and to warn that states should prepare for similar meddling attempts in the midterm election next year. All right, so we're waiting on that update, and I know you have some strong thoughts on this, Guy Benson.
Well, I think that there's so much discussion about the dysfunction of Washington, and a lot of it's merited and true, but I think that the Senate Intelligence Committee deserves a shout-out for going about this process in a professional, bipartisan manner. And I think we're going to see some findings that ought to disturb and concern every single American, because if, and it seems like when, we find out for certain that the Russians attempted to interfere in our election, that is not saying that Hillary Clinton should have won. That is not a shot at Donald Trump. That is simply grappling with a very worrisome fact that an enemy of ours, or at least an adversary, is trying to mess with us and our electoral system, which is the bedrock of what we do in this country.
I'm seeing a lot of agreement on that end of the couch.
I couldn't agree more. And
you're going to get me in trouble, Marie.
I know.
We're not allowed to agree.
I'm the one that's going to get in trouble here. No, I think that a couple weeks ago, the Department of Homeland Security sent 21 states notices that their election systems were attempted to get hacked into. Now, no votes were changed. No one was successful. But the most important thing we need to do with this report is prevent it from happening again. And I want this administration to take seriously the threat, because next time it may not be Republican, or it may not be Democrats getting hacked, it may be Republicans. They need to look at these findings and say, this is only going to get worse. How do we prevent this?
That's going to be the big question moving forward, is what is going to be done as a result of these findings. And I would hope that it isn't just about political actions versus real solutions to preventing the Russians from interfering in the future. The administration, from the beginning of the Trump administration's goals, have said they want to seriously address the cyber war that we're in. Cyber is a huge part of preventing the Russians from meddling in our elections in the future. But this is not surprising. The Russians don't just attack U.S. elections.
Oh, no.
They also attack elections all over the world.
That's
and
right.
so moving forward, we'll have to see and accept the reality that this is the world we're living in, and we better be prepared for it next time by putting those things aside. One more point.
Absolutely.
At the end of this, too, there's going to have to be a reconciliation of the facts between the special counsel investigation, the House Intelligence investigation, and the Senate Intelligence Committee investigation. And I think we'll have a lot more perspective on what actually happened once we can see all of those reports together.
So if one side isn't looking to indict the other, it would really be helpful, because, you know, no one has argued that those 17 agencies weren't at least in part right, that something happened. And in fact, the president wasn't wrong when he was questioning whether or not there had been some votes that might have been attempted to. And you bring up a beautiful point in those states. It's not that votes were flipped, but something was going on at those election sites. I remember when he alluded to that. So is it possible that we can go forth without one side or the other getting their ire up? Look, it may come out that they messed with our election, and as you pointed out so sophisticatedly, which I wish more people would say it, it doesn't mean that it would flip the votes.
Right.
It doesn't mean that at all. What it does mean is we better watch our six, because somebody wants to mess with us.
I think that's right. And the other point that I'm ruminating on this, we have not heard a single peep or a leak that there's going to be any bombshell coming out of this committee on the C word, collusion, right? Because we were all about collusion. We're collusion, collusion, collusion. It doesn't sound, I think we would know. I think we would have an inkling that there was something big about to drop if they had something on that. My guess, just a hunch, I don't know.
You mean by that you think it'd leak?
I think it would leak, and I don't think it hasn't leaked, and therefore
Not that we're clairvoyant.
I think we're going to get some good information and some important information. I don't think there's going to be some sort of smoking gun proven tying the Trump people to Russia, because I'm not sure that a smoking gun exists.
And this won't be the end of the story. Bob Mueller has a lot more work to do.
We are awaiting that update. We'll bring it to you when it begins. Many in the mainstream media pushing hard for gun control in the wake of what happened in Las Vegas. One host even saying the NRA should be branded a terrorist organization. Is this more PC politics, and is it wrong to push an agenda at this time? And as we've been telling you, President Trump visiting Las Vegas as the gun debate is raging, whether both sides can ever reach a compromise. An update by the Senate Intel Committee on the probe into Russian meddling in the election. Let's listen.
Tasked with investigation of this unbelievable act. So we're here to update you and the American people about the investigation into Russia's meddling in the 2016 election. When we started this investigation on 23 January of this year, we had a very clear focus. We were focused on an evaluation of the ICA, the intelligence community assessment of Russia's involvement in our 2016 election. Additionally, the investigation was to look into any collusion by either campaign during the 2016 elections. The third piece was an assessment of the ongoing Russian active measures, including information and influence campaigns that may still exist and may be ongoing. The investigation started with those three buckets of interest. Now we're over 100 interviews later, which translates to 250 plus hours of interviews, almost 4,000 pages of transcripts, almost 100,000 pages of documents reviewed by our staff and some by members. It includes highly classified intelligence reporting. It includes emails, campaign documents, and technical cyber analysis products. The committee has held 11 open hearings this calendar year that have touched on Russia's interference in U.S. elections. I can say that our dedicated Russia investigative staff have literally worked 6 to 7 hours a day since 23 January to get us to the point we are today.
6 to 7 days a week.
6 to 7 days a week, excuse me. So far, in the interview process, we have interviewed everybody who had a hand or a voice into the creation of the intelligence community assessment. We have spent 9 times the amount of time that the community spent putting the ICA together, reviewing the ICA, and reviewing all the supporting documents that went in it. But in addition to that, the things that were thrown on the cutting room floor that they might not have found appropriate for the ICA itself, but we may have found of relevance to our investigation. We have interviewed every official of the Obama administration to fully understand what they saw, what clarity and transparency they had into Russia involvement, and more importantly, what they did or did not do and what drove those actions. Again, I'm reminded that we will come out with a finding at some point, and part of that hopefully will be recommendations as to changes we need to make. So we've tried to think as thoroughly through this as we can. We have interviewed literally individuals from around the world. So for those of you that choose to stake out when the next witness is coming, there's some that have snuck through because you don't know who they are. Now, it's safe to say that the inquiry has expanded slightly. Initial interviews and document review generated hundreds of additional requests on our part for information. It identified many leads that expanded our initial inquiry. The volume of work done by the staff has prepared the committee to look at some areas of our investigation that we hope will very soon reach some definite conclusion, but we're not there yet. We're not ready to close them. One of those areas is the ICA itself. Given that we have interviewed everybody who had a hand in the ICA, I think there is general consensus among members and staff that we trust the conclusions of the ICA, but we don't close our consideration of it in the unlikelihood that we find additional information through the completion of our investigation. The Obama administration's response to Russian interference. As I said, we have interviewed every person within the administration. They have volunteered and they have been unbelievably cooperative to come in and share everything they knew, and in most cases were interviewed for over 2 hours. The meeting at the Mayflower. Let me be specific. These are not issues that are closed. We have not come to any final conclusions. We have interviewed 7 individuals that attended the Mayflower event. The testimony from all 7 were consistent with each other, but we understand that with the current investigation open, there may be additional information we find that pulling that thread may give us some additional insight that we don't see today. Changes to the platform committee. And again, I'm addressing some things that have been written by you in this room, and they may not have been on our chart, but we felt that we had to dig deeply into them. We have, the committee staff has interviewed every person involved in the drafting of the campaign platform. Campaign staff was attempting to implement what they believed to be guidance, to be strong, to be a strong ally in Ukraine, but also leave the door open for better relations with Russia. I'm giving you the feedback we got from the individuals who were in the room making the decisions. Again, not closed, open for the continuation. The last one I want to cover is the Comey memos. This topic has been hotly debated, and the committee is satisfied that our involvement with this issue has reached a logical end as it relates to the Russia investigation. Now, again, this is not something that we've closed, but we have exhausted every person that we can talk to get information that's pertinent to us relative to the Russia investigation. Questions that you might have surrounding Comey's firing are better answered by the General Counsel or by the Justice Department, not the Select Committee of Intelligence in the United States Senate. There are concerns that we continue to pursue. Collusion. The committee continues to look into all evidence to see if there was any hint of collusion. Now, I'm not going to even discuss initial findings because we haven't any. We've got a tremendous amount of documents still to go through. And just to put in perspective, I said we've done over 100 interviews, over 250 hours. We currently have booked, for the balance of this month, 25 additional interviews. That may not end up being the total, but as of today, there are 25 individuals booked to meet with our staffs before the end of this month alone pertaining to the Russian investigation. We have more work to do as it relates to collusion, but we're developing a clearer picture of what happened. What I will confirm is that the Russian intelligence service is determined, clever, and I recommend that every campaign and every election official take this very seriously as we move into this November's election and as we move into preparation for the 2018 election. I'm going to ask the Vice Chairman to cover the other areas that we're in the process of pursuing.
Well, thank you, Richard. And I want to say at the outset again, I'm very proud of this committee. I'm proud of the way the committee has acted. I'm proud of our staff and the enormous amount of work they've done. I know the chairman and I see many of you daily in the hallways and know that this feels like it's taking a long time. It is taking a long time. But getting it right and getting all the facts is what we owe the American people. And as we've seen, you know, for example, you know, stories that emerged in the late summer around, you know, Mr. Trump Jr.'s meeting or the possibilities of a Trump Tower in Moscow. You know, Chairman and I would love to find ways to close things down, but we also still see strains and threads that we need to continue to pursue. I want to touch on two subjects. The first is, echoing what Richard's already said, the Russian active measures efforts did not end on Election Day 2016. They were not only geared at the United States of America. We have seen Russian active measures take place in France. We've seen concerns raised in the Netherlands. We've seen concerns raised in Germany. And we need to be on guard. One of the things that is particularly troubling to both of us is the fact that it's become evident that 21 states' electoral systems were not all penetrated, but there was at least you know, trying to open the door in these 21 states. It has been very disappointing to me, and I believe the chairman as well, that it took 11 months for the Department of Homeland Security to reveal those 21 states, and still don't know why exactly last Friday was the date they chose to reveal that information, but still believe there needs to be a more aggressive whole-of-government approach in terms of protecting our electoral system. Remember, you know, to make a change, even in a national election, doesn't require penetration into 50 states, arguably. And states like the chairman's and mine could be key. You could pick 2 or 3 states in 2 or 3 jurisdictions and alter an election. And I believe in a state like mine where in Virginia, New Jersey, in 34 days, we have elections. I'm glad to see the DHS has said they are going to up their game and particularly help those states with elections that are happening this year. But we need to make sure that there is a organized, again, whole of government approach. I know in Virginia, for example, even before we discovered that we were one of the 21 states, I think the state electoral board, in an abundance of caution, decertified one set of machines that were touch screens that didn't have kind of a paper ballot or a paper trail to this. One of the things we wanted to emphasize with this briefing, that this is an ongoing concern, and that if states don't proactively move forward, very shortly we'll be getting into primary seasons early on in 2018, and this is an ongoing challenge. And again, I'd point out, even after last week, Wisconsin, Texas, and California still have some lack of clarity about whether the appropriate individuals were notified. I also want to raise an issue that the chairman and I have been working jointly on as well, and that is the Russians' use of social media platforms. Social media platforms that increasingly the vast majority of us turn to for information, for news, in a way that is very different. If you look, for example, in the realm of political advertising, we've seen a over 700% increase in the use of digital political advertising between 2012 and 2016. The expectation is that may double or triple again in terms of the next election cycle because of the ability to so target voters. I was concerned at first that some of these social media platform companies did not take this threat seriously enough. I believe they are recognizing that threat now. They've provided us with information. We think it's important that the three companies that we've invited, Google, Twitter, and Facebook, will appear in a public hearing so that Americans can again hear both about how we're going to protect, I would argue, three areas. One, making sure that if you see an ad that appears on a social media site, that Americans can know whether the source of that ad was generated by foreign entities. Two, to make sure that if you see a story that is trending and becoming more popular, whether that trending is because a series of Americans are liking that story or liking that particular page, or that's generated by real individuals, or whether that's generated by bots, or in some cases it may be falsely identified accounts. For example, Facebook has indicated between 30 and 50,000 such accounts were taken down in France because due to Russian interference. And third, just the notion that both of us have been in politics a long time. If you have somebody running an ad for you against you, you ought to be able to go down and take at least a look at that content, the same way that if ads are run for or against you on TV, radio, or newsprint, you can at least get a look at that content. This is an ongoing process, but we're seeing increasing levels of cooperation. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the chairman and be happy to take questions.
Let me just say that many of you have asked us, are we going to release the Facebook ads? We don't release documents provided to our committee, period. Let me say it again. The Senate Intelligence Committee does not release documents provided by witnesses, companies, whatever the classification. It's not a practice that we're going to get into. Clearly, if any of the social media platforms would like to do that, we're fine with them doing it because we've already got scheduled an open hearing because we believe the American people deserve to hear firsthand. And just to remind people, on October the 25th, we will have another open hearing, number 12, with Michael Cohen. On November 1st, we have invited the social media companies that Mark mentioned to be our guest at an open hearing, and we feel confident that they will take us up on it. As it relates to the Steele dossier, unfortunately, the committee has hit a wall. We have, on several occasions, made attempts to contact Mr. Steele, to meet with Mr. Steele, to include personally the vice chairman and myself as two individuals making that connection. Those offers have gone unaccepted. The committee cannot really decide the credibility of the dossier without understanding things like who paid for it, who are your sources and subsources. We're investigating a very expansive Russian network of interference in U.S. elections. And though we have been incredibly enlightened at our ability to rebuild backwards the Steele dossier up to a certain date, getting past that point has been somewhat impossible. And I say this because I don't think we're going to find any intelligence products that unlock that key to pre-June of 16. My hope is that Mr. Steele will make a decision to meet with either Mark and I or the committee or both so that we can hear his side of it versus for us to depict in our findings what his intent or what his actions were. And I say that to you, but I also say it to Chris Steele. Potential witnesses that we might ask to come in the future. I strongly suggest that you come in and speak with us. If we believe that you have something valuable to bring to the committee, if you don't voluntarily do it, I will assure you today, you will be compelled to do it. I can compel you to come, I can't compel you to talk. But that will be in a very public, done in a very public way if in fact you turn down the private offer. The committee has proven to be balanced, professional, and that we're willing to listen to everybody. Let me say in closing, for those following our investigation in the press, I want you to know that you only see glimpses of the amount of work the committee's done. We're doing much of our work behind closed doors to ensure the privacy and the protection of witnesses and sensitive sources and methods. It's become increasingly clear that the committee has stayed focused on building the foundation to be able to finish our investigation thoroughly and in an accountable way. I'm confident today that when we started, we chose wisely by choosing our professional staff to do this investigation and not to the talking heads all around the country that suggested we couldn't do this unless we went out and hired a whole new group. And I think the numbers here reflect that. Ultimately, we look forward to completing our work and presenting our findings to the public. I can't set a date as to when that will be. Mark can't set a date as to when that can be. We will share with you when we have exhausted every thread of intelligence, every potential witness that can contribute anything to this. I don't, by any stretch of the imagination, tell you that there's been value to everybody we've met with. But if we hadn't met with them, then you would have questioned us as to why we didn't. Now, the truth is, nobody in this room, and Mark and I might be included in it, none of us in this room may know everybody we've met with. We're not going to share who we interview. We're not going to share what we ask, and we're certainly not going to share what they tell us. Mm-hmm. We're not going to share with you the documents that we got. But when you receive 100,000 documents plus, a large group of that coming from the Trump campaign alone, when you look at the country's most sensitive intelligence products, let me assure you, we're going to get the best view of what happened that anybody could possibly get. At the end of this process, we will be sure that anybody could possibly get. At the end of this process, we will be sure that we present to the American people our findings as best we have been able to accumulate them. So with that, I'll be happy to open it for questions. Chad?
All right, you have been watching an update from the Senate Intelligence Committee on Russian meddling in the U.S. 2016 presidential election. The update there was that the staff has been working 6-7 days a week tirelessly since January 23rd. They hope to come to a conclusion, meaning they have not, saying we're not there yet. The inquiry has expanded. They both noted 100 interviews, 250 hours later, 25 more interviews set up. They addressed the Comey memos. They called them hotly debated, and they're hoping to reach some sort of conclusion on that. They have exhausted every person we can talk to. The committee continues to look at all the evidence involved. Vice Chair Mark Warner weighed in, saying we want to get it right. We want to get all the facts. Russians tried to meddle in 21 state elections. That is the latest update coming from the Senate Intelligence Committee, hearing from Mark Warner and Richard Burr. On the side of the screen, you will notice a live shot on the ground in Las Vegas. President Trump has arrived along with the First Lady there. We have been awaiting his arrival. He is there along with the First Lady to meet with patients, medical professionals, civilian heroes, first responders, all after that horrific attack happening on the Las Vegas Strip Sunday night. We all woke up to the news on Monday morning. The president said he would be there. He is. He has just landed. We're waiting for him to step off of that plane. We do know that he is on that plane right now, accompanied by House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy. Representatives Richard Amodei of Nevada, as well as Senator Dean Heller of Nevada, are with the president on Air Force One. When he gets on the ground, he will be greeted by the governor, the sheriff, and the mayor, as well as 3 members from D.C. Also on the plane with the president right now, members of his team, Stephen Miller, Tom Bossert, Rob Porter, Hope Hicks, Joyce Meyer from Legislative Affairs. The president is arriving on the ground in Las Vegas at a very much needed moment for this country after we have witnessed the largest mass shooting in modern American history.